Hello, I'm Udegard, sir, and welcome back. Today I will be revealing my penultimate list of the final ratings of every Arsenal player that played in the 2020-21 Premier League season, and using tier maker, of course. And now, without further ado, let's get into the list. I think to myself, despite how poor Arsenal performed this season, they actually were above average. And I know I don't like to use VAR as an excuse, but the stat that I became aware of, ironically, after the season was that if not for VAR, Arsenal would have finished top four, which is very interesting. Not to mention how well they performed in the second half of the season, as they were surprisingly the second best team in the Premier League after Manchester City. So there is some positives to take away from the season. And as we get into the list today, obviously I'll start with the ratings for today, and I'll provide a link to this list in the description. And we go from 10 being man of the match, 9 top class, 8 very good, etc. And let's start with one of Arsenal's most polarizing players in Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who has been one of Arsenal's most successful players in the past few years since being signed from Borussia Dortmund. And this year, however, was a different story. As don't get me wrong, he was still extremely productive. There were obviously moments of high quality. There's also moments of very, very poor form. And particularly, Aubameyang didn't have the best luck this season. He struggled with form, like I mentioned, and injury, and obviously being sick didn't help. But overall, I would give him a 7 out of 10. I thought he had a good season for what he's been able to do. But I expect more from him, and I think there was definitely room to improve. Now, regarding the next player on your screen, I'm actually not too sure who that is, to be honest, and I'm pretty sure he's an academy player, and I feel embarrassed not knowing this, and obviously having not played the season for Arsenal's senior team, I will abide with not ranking him. Same goes for the player right here. As we get to the next player, who also just so happened to be an academy graduate this year and a invaluable contributor, surprisingly, is Valerian Balogun. And he really came into his own this year. I was really impressed with his play, and I look forward to seeing him in the future. And as he did perform very well at times this season, even exceeding Aubameyang at times. But I think with his lack of game time, I will only give him an okay. But I think the future is really bright for him. Next, we have Hector Bellerin, who, like with Aubameyang, has had some moments of quality in his past at Arsenal, and is one of Arsenal's longest tenured players. And I think the lust is starting to wear out on Bellerin, as he really struggled this season. I mean, the fact that Cedric and even Callum Chambers were able to get in game time ahead of him just goes to show you how much he's really fallen in the depth chart. And particularly as there's rumors of him leaving Arsenal this season, which I'm very vehemently disappointed about, because he's been one of my favorite players for Arsenal since he came there in 2014. But his defending was below average this season, and that's why he wasn't on the pitch as much. And I think that I will give him a ranking of 6 out of 10, being average. Next, we have Danny Ceballos. And Ceballos is a really tricky one, as obviously last year came in and he was a revelation at Arsenal. And he obviously has the skill at having, being on loan from Real Madrid, and he got a tremendous amount of game time this season, but he didn't really do anything extraordinary in his time on the field. And if anything, he a wasn't the greatest at covering the entire midfield, and I really think they struggled because of that. Would I love to have him back next season? Absolutely, but I just don't know if he is the player they need right now. And while he did have a great season this, I think that he's just a good player, and gonna give him a 7 out of 10. Next, we have Callum Chambers, and Chambers hasn't had much luck with Arsenal in the past few years, having gone on loan and then not having the ability to find any time to play, whether it be injury or just being behind Bellerin. But this year, he really improved and was able to put in a significant amount of time on the field. And I think back just to the last game against Brighton and how he made a couple of great passes that led to Arsenal's goals. And not to mention his defending this season was superior to Bellerin, and a result of him being picked over him. And I really liked how he played in defense, and I think that has the potential to be a future starter for Arsenal with the future uncertain at right back. And as a result, I will give him I'll also give him a 7 out of 10 ranking. And you'll see a lot of 7 out of 10 rankings from Arsenal players. Next, we have Mohamed Elneny. And the Elneny Ceballos partnership in midfield did seem to have some chemistry, and I really liked it at times. Obviously, it was their backup pairing compared to Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka, but Elneny performed really well. He scored a great goal this season, and like with Chambers, he's paid his dues and is finally getting the time that the playing time that he deserves. But I think that he is just okay, and or he's just barely above okay, and he's not someone I would like to see starting on a regular basis. But every once in a while he does his job and he does it to the best of his ability, and I respect him for that. And I will give him a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have Gabrielle Margalis. And in his first season with Arsenal, I didn't really know what to expect, as I wasn't really familiar with him before he came to Arsenal, even though he came from Lille. And right away, he was put into the starting lineup, and he had to deal with, and as he's only 24 years old, he had to deal with some inconsistency in defense. And while their consistency of their fullbacks was no question about that, it was pretty stable. His other center back pairing really varied on whether Rob Holding was up to it or David Louise, who's obviously not of terrific quality, but obviously someone that Gabrielle can learn from. And Gabrielle did have his moments this year, but he also did struggle for form. And I think as a result, there were some games where he really looked out of his element. And I think back to the game against Manchester United, or I think back to the game against Liverpool, where he was completely manhandled. And that's definitely a room for improvement. And overall, I will give him a 7 out of 10. Next, we have Rob Holding. And Rob Holding started a majority of the games this season, and was a presence to be reckoned with on Arsenal's defensive line, as he was really a shutdown presence. I was really impressed with Rob Holding this season. Obviously, it's easy to scrutinize him, but as a tall and lengthy center back, you really can't get any better than this. I mean, he is Arsenal's, for lack of a better term, he's Arsenal's version of Harry Maguire, or even I can't believe I'm saying this, Virgil Van Dyke. He's not accepted to provide any offense, but he's really good at his defensive position. And while there were times that he was out of position, I'll give him that. He did prove that he was a invaluable, like I said, contributor to the team. And I will actually give him a 8 out of 10. I really thought he was one of Arsenal's better players this season. Next, we go to Alexander Lacazette, who was Arsenal's leading goal scorer this season. And with all the talk of him potentially leaving Arsenal, he really proved the haters wrong and went off for a above average season. And even coming off the bench for most games, he made an impact. And I commend him for that. And I obviously it's up to him as to whether he wants to stay at Arsenal. But I think he has a superior season to Aubameyang this season. And as a result, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. I really thought he performed superior to how he's been the past 2 years. Next, we have Bern Leno. And this one's very controversial in some ways. And I want to be impartial on this, as the fact that goalkeeper is one of the toughest positions to play. And Leno is obviously a very high he's of quality, having deservedly been picked to the Germany squad for the European Championships, and he played a majority of the games for us in the season, and so for every reason he had and so there was reason for him to vary depending on how fit he was, and there obviously was times this season where he was like otherworldly and he was exceptional, and there were moments where he made some egregious mistakes, and some of which were not entirely his fault, but he probably should have known better. And I don't really know where Arsenal could really get a better goalkeeper, and I think that he definitely proved that he's their starting goalkeeper. I would love to see him return next season, but I think overall, and in a similar situation to with in a different sport with the Calgary Flames and their goaltender Jacob Markstrom, where they played him to death really, and he just played to the best performance. I think the same could be said for Leno, and overall I would give him a 7 out of 10. Next we have David Louise, and while I tend to rat on him for his discrepancies sometimes, he didn't play a lot this season, which is good, because the more he plays, the more chance of there being a mistake. But I mean, the fact is he's a competent defender, and there were times this season where he was, like any player, he was very good, and it just really varied on who they were playing really. But I wish him all the best as he leaves Arsenal next season. But I just think he's lost a step, and I think I can only give him a 6 out of 10. Next we have Pablo Mari. And Mari didn't get a lot of playing time this season, as he was second behind Gabrielle in terms of left-footed center backs. And similar to Louise, he didn't really do anything impressive this season, but he didn't make a lot of mistakes either. And I think that obviously gives them stability to their center back position, which is much needed. And I think that he offers good depth, and I think overall he's an average player, and not someone that Arsenal necessarily will see starting from the next season on a regular basis. Next we have Gabrielle Martinelli, who came onto the scene last year and was a man amongst boys. He was so impressive, and people were comparing him to Cristiano Ronaldo almost, and there's reason to believe that. Now, obviously, he ended last season prior with a major injury, and so it took him a few months to come in performance as he did last year. And while he didn't get a lot of playing time, he really proved that he still has the quality to be a elite striker. And in his few performances, he really shown. And I think that I would like to see him play a lot more next year. And I think he has the ability to move into the number 9 role and take over Aubameyang's spot in the starting 11. And in that, I can't help but give him an 8 out of 10. Next up is Reese Nelson. And as we get into the youngsters for Arsenal and the future for them, Reese Nelson is definitely one of those players. And while I didn't react to any of the games of Arsenal's first half of the season, that's really when Nelson put in his best play, as he was very good during the first half, and then he kind of appeared in the second half of the season, not really getting a lot of chances to play, as it's hard to get behind, as the winger position was pretty deep, and Arteta didn't seem to have a lot of trust in Nelson. But at only 21 years old, he has so much potential as well, and I think that he is a good player. And although I'm not really sure how much potential he does have. Next up is Eddie Nketiah. And Nketiah had with the absence of Martinelli, he was able to seize the opportunity and as a result received plethora of game time. And I think back specifically to the game against Fulham, where he scored the tying goal. And he scored a large amount of goals this season, finishing he finished with 7 goals overall, including 2 in the Premier League. So there's definitely room to grow, and I think that no doubt if he's given the opportunity to start, he will produce. But I think that a move on loan would be much needed for him in improving his play, and specifically maybe to a Premier League team, maybe the team like Watford or something like that, where he can help a championship level team survive in the Premier League. But overall, I will give him a 7 out of 10. And I know, like I said, it's a number that will be synonymous with a lot of players, but it's just so hard to be so critical. Next, we have Martin Udegard. And holy, with Udegard, I only wish that I could have seen him more. He was everything that he's been hyped up to be. And he's been hyped up since he was 15 when he first made his appearance for Real Madrid. And I was just so impressed with him this season. Holy, I mean, obviously as a center attacking midfielder, you're not expecting him to play any underlying defensive role. But his playmaking ability was unworldly, and particularly his passing, as whether it be passes to Nicola Pepe in the game against Brighton, or this pass to Gabrielle Martinelli that won them a game a couple weeks ago. He really was the number 10 or number 11 that they've craved for since Mesut Ozil. And he's the closest that they've come to a player of Ozil's quality. And I think in his short time here, he was absolutely on another level. And I would absolutely love if he could return to Arsenal. I understand that he is a player fit for a high quality team like Real Madrid. And as a result, I will give him a 9 out of 10. Just a top class overall player. No denying that. Next, we have Kieran Tierney. And Kieran Tierney was a mainstay on Arsenal's left side of the defense this year. After showing some real promise last year, he was one of the best left backs in Premier League this season. And obviously, it really hindered Arsenal when he went down with an injury for a large period of time. But when he came back, he was almost near to his former self. And whether his crossing again was terrific and his defending was above average as well. He was able to get goal side on players, and his jockeying was great as well. And such a great talent and a player I'm so happy that Arsenal has at their display. And overall, I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10. Next, we have Nicola Pepe. And I'm a big proponent of Pepe. He's really come into his own in the past couple of years. And while he'll never probably be worth that enormous price tag that was put on him when they purchased him from Lille, he is much welcomed at Arsenal in terms of how good he is. And he had a really successful end of the season that I wish had been more consistent in the middle of the season and at the start of the season. But he's really someone that Arsenal can build around. And when he's given a chance to play with high quality players like Martin Udegard and Bukai Osaka, he really flourishes. And while I think that his play at the end of the season could propel him up to 8 or 9 out of 10, I think that just a little inconsistency at the start of the season is what will hold him back, and I can only give him a 7 out of 10. Next, we have Runar Alex Runarsson. And I kind of feel bad for him as he was only signed to be the backup goalkeeper. And obviously, when what was a last-minute move after they lost Emiliano Martinez. But he never really had a chance at all. He only played one game this season, which he did not look comfortable at all. And then he never played again. And with that in mind and his lack of playing time, I will have to give him I'll unfortunately have to give him a 3 out of 10. And he's just not someone I expect to see Arsenal playing in the future. Next, we have Maddie Ryan. And Ryan was signed on loan from Brighton and Hove Albion in the January transfer window. And it was a little discerning as despite his top quality, he had lost his starting position at Brighton to Robert Sanchez. And while he didn't get a ton of time to put in his work, he performed very competent in his few games in action. And he's someone that I would like to see Arsenal have as a backup goalkeeper next year, as it brings him a much needed stability behind Leno. Although Ryan was not as exceptional as Martinez, I will still give him a 5 out of 10. Next, we have Bukai Osaka. And Saka, honestly, is one of my favorite players on Arsenal. He's just so versatile. He gives it his all every game, and you know what to expect with him, and he'll put his best game forward every time. And particularly, he really shown this season as well, playing his uncharacteristic position in right and left mid. Having been more of a left wing back last season, he was really the main player in bringing Arsenal into the play and moving the ball around, and as well, his skill level was unworldly. As I think back, to a couple of plays where he backheeled the pass to Tierney, or just his play with Tierney in general, and his chemistry with Pepe, and all of his other teammates. I honestly think it's safe to say that he was their best player this season, and I think deservedly so. He is potentially earned a trip to the Euros with England because of it. And while this is in perspective of being a Arsenal fan, and obviously I'm biased as one, I will give him. I'm going to give him a 10 out of 10. There's really nothing else I could have expected, and he was just so marvelous on the pitch, and someone that I that you can't take your eyes off of. He's an exceptional talent that I hope Arsenal can build upon for the future. Next, we have Emil Smith-Rowe. And Smith-Rowe, like Osaka, had a lot of opportunities this season, and I was glad to see more of their youngsters get into the lineup because they deserved it and they really played to it. Normally I wouldn't be so praising of youngsters being included in a squad, but they were definitely did not approve. They proved that age was just a number, and that they have a tremendous amount of experience, obviously being gained from having started the season in particular. But with Smith Rowe, he was honestly a revelation as well. He had a lot of moments of that he was terrific in, and only being 20 years old, the future looks bright, and I think that he is playmaking, like with like I said, with Saka, was on another level. He also chipped in with a couple of goals in the Premier League this season, and was a menace to be reckoned with by defenders in the Europa League as well. And as a result, I will give him a 8 out of 10. I think with Udegard, with Udegard's likely out departure next year, I think he'll take on an increased role to even this year, and potentially be Arsenal's new number 10 unless they go out and sign someone else. Which I mean, I think he's shown that he can be that kind of player, and I really hope he gets the chance to do that. Next, you have Cedric, and I was a big fan of Cedric. The the fact that he was permanently signed from Southampton, and made me a little skeptical because the fact that I didn't really know where he would fit in Arsenal, and I was content that Hector Bellerin was their guy at right back, but I was wrong, as Cedric exceeded Bellerin and even Chambers at times, and was also a above average player this season for Arsenal, and someone I wish that they played more. As particularly in the second half of the season, in the few games he got in, he was everywhere on the pitch, whether it be defending exceptionally well, or with his great crosses as well, like with Tierney. There's nothing more I can ask from him, and I look forward to next season when he plays. Now, I don't expect him to be a starter next season, but he is definitely a much needed security blanket behind whoever does start at right back, and that which could even be him or Callum Chambers. But overall, I will give him a 7 out of 10. Next, we have Thomas Partey. When he was controversially signed from Atletico Madrid, I was ecstatic, as he's exactly the kind of player Arsenal has been craving for the past 2 years, and a defensive-minded midfielder. And I think that if you think of it like that, and not of someone like Kevin De Bruyne, for example, and who's obviously a great gifted playmaker and all-around exceptional player, Partey played his role eloquently, and there's really nothing much I can ask for. Obviously, he wasn't expected to really chip in offensively. I would have liked to see that more. He didn't really play. Didn't really perform exceptionally defensively, but it was good enough. In fact, Arsenal didn't really allow that many goals for how their how their how scrutinized their defense was, and I think he was a part of it. And without him, I think they could have let in a lot more goals, because I think that he's a lot more defensive minded than Danny Ceballos, and that is exactly the kind of player that they've needed for so long. And I don't want to take it for granted as a result. And overall, I will give him an 8 out of 10 this season, as I think that there's definitely some room for improvement, and obviously he had to shift to a new market in London from Madrid. And I think he did as good as he could in that sense. And he's still a player of top quality. There's no denying that as well. Next, we come to Willian. And Willian being one of the most negatively talked about players for Arsenal this season. And for good reason. I mean, the fact is he's coming into Arsenal, he's been known as this great midfielder who has played in a couple World Cups, won Premier Leagues at Chelsea. And with those expectations in mind, you would think that he would be an exceptional addition to Arsenal. However, what we haven't put into mind is the fact that he's 33 and has put in so much work at Chelsea that he was basically a shell of his former self. And that was apparent this season. As I don't want to be overly critical with him, as considering what they got for him, how he was free, there's really not much to complain about. Although I do really wish that he was more impactful, and particularly his one goal this season is extremely disappointing. And so much so that I don't know if he has the quality to play in the Premier League anymore. And with rumors of him going to MLS, I don't even know if he's good enough for MLS. He was just really he looked really out of it this season, and I know he was really excited to come to Arsenal. He said he wanted to win a trophy before he left, and unfortunately, that's not gonna happen. I do expect he will leave this summer, which is disappointing. But he did show flashes of his former greatness, and for that, I will give him an okay. I think he was okay for what they got for him. That's still disappointing. And last but not least, the last player I will be ranking today is Granit Xhaka. Now, Xhaka is hard to evaluate as what he's obviously one of the Arsenal's mainstay starters, but he's never really improved over the past 5 years. He's been with Arsenal. He just goes out on the pitch, does his thing, gets obviously gets a yellow card, and nothing much, nothing less. He's not a player you notice on the pitch, and I think that he's easily replaceable, and I'm boggled as to how he's still a consistent starter on this team, because I don't know if he would be on any other team. He's sometimes lazy, and that is inflicted in his disciplinary records with his rash tackles most games, and I think that he definitely was better this season because he played with a competent midfielder in Thomas Partey. And when he did play with Partey, when he played with anyone else, with Elneny, they tended to struggle. And I think that his level of play depends on the quality of player he plays next to. But I think for the most part this season, he was only an average player at best, and he really has been for the past 5 years. And I think that it might be time to potentially let go of him. And as a result, I will give him a 6 out of 10. And as well as Jacka, he made way too many errors that led to goals this season, and as particularly he was at fault for that monumental goal that cost them the victory against Burnley. He has to be looked at as a nuisance for them. And last but not least, I'll be rating their manager, former player, Mikel Arteta. And Arteta, I feel bad for him because I wish that he was. I feel like he did the best he could with. The Premier League was very competitive this season. I think there's an accomplishment to finish top 10. Obviously, for a club like Arsenal, you expect more. But he wasn't able to get the best out of his players sometimes. And I was perplexed by some of his tactics in some games. And they didn't seem to be, and he didn't really seem to be very good at motivating his players to playing at the highest level. And I think that this just comes with maturity, and this is a very young team, and he's a young manager. with not a lot of experience. And as he gets into another season next year and grows more confident in his coaching abilities, I think he will improve, and I think their play will reflect that. I I do like the way they play in their tactics, and obviously seen having um, seen Manchester City firsthand, Arteta is aware of what it takes to be a competitive team and a successful team. And I think that Arsenal has the right pieces in place to be a successful team. But there's a reason to rid of any of the dead wood that is um, holding them back from realizing their potential. But overall, I think he's a good manager. And while Arsenal could do better, I think that they're they still have the right man in charge. And I think he was always he's always been the right man to succeed Wenger. And I think he's doing as good of a job as he can. So that's my ranking for every Arsenal player that played this season. I will just make a couple uh, quick adjustments, and you will see the changes on your screen. So there you have it. I only made one minor adjustment, and I moved Nicola Pepe up to 8 out of 10. But overall, I think that this is the team that this is the team Arsenal put out this year, and there's really nothing left to say as to how disappointing it was. But at least they had fun. And regarding any of the players in the bang average category to okay, any players below the good category, I could see being extendable in the near future. But anyway, I hope you enjoy my ranking. Leave a like, subscribe, like to see more. Come on, you Gunners. Arrivederci.